Every dying is different because every person is different.
I flunked the hospice program. Now, not many people can say that.
Doctors die differently than patients.
She doesn't really know where she is, or she's not very with it right now.
I don't want to suffer like that. See, if I was on life machine, just let me go and get it over with.
You can't kill her trying to save her.
If they have that conversation up front when things aren't so dire, it makes our job easier.
Presently, we're still a death-denying society.
I'd like to just go to sleep one night and that would be it. Now, nobody gets that lucky all the time, and I don't know. I don't want to be in agony and pain if I don't have to.
Deceased, departed, bought the farm, passed away. No matter how you say it, it happens to all of us. More than 2.5 million people will die in the United States this year. The quality of those deaths is often affected by where they occur, whether at home surrounded by family and loved ones, or in the intensive care unit, hooked up to pulsing machines with blinking lights. The difference usually comes down to whether you passed on your dying wishes before passing on.
This program was made possible by the David and Laura Lovell Foundation in support of Arizona Public Media's efforts to educate people on the spectrum of life options, and by the Marshall Foundation, supporting charitable organizations in Tucson and Pima County, Arizona, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Artemisia Galvan has always had a big heart. She ran a boarding home where she took care of the mentally disabled and folks down on their luck. She also raised her grandchild as if he were her own son, adopting Adrian when he was 8 years old. Now, Artemisia is the one receiving the care.
She's always helped me, make the, right decisions. Growing up, I know I wasn't the greatest, but she always kept me, on a straight, narrow path to succeed in life, and she's always been a strong woman, very strong, very feisty, doesn't take no for an answer.
It's okay. It's okay, girl. We're all here. It's okay. We love you.
She raised me, and then I joined the U.S. Army. And she hasn't been in the best health the last few years, and it's looking like now she's in ICU. I know decisions that have to be made, but it's more of a, emotional part of actually making that decision, making the call. She's breathing a lot slower today. Mm-hmm. She cannot breathe on her own. So what we're looking at is, quality versus quantity of life at this moment. It's very painful seeing her go through this. And what basically what we're trying to do is make the right decisions as far as what does the future hold for her, how's her quality of life is going to be from here on out. She's falling asleep. It's definitely harder to think of someone else, especially, a parent, making that decision, what's going to be best for them. I just want to make her comfortable and grant whatever, final wishes she has. You think you prepare for this, and, throughout the years, I've been preparing because being stationed in Hawaii, be able to make the trip, make all the decisions and stuff.
Love you.
You really don't realize how hard it is here actually in that position.
Only 10% of us die from an acute injury anymore. Half of us are now dying of frailty and cognitive decline. Half. We don't die of one thing anymore, we die of many things, and getting older and frail.
Sue Taylor lives this every day. She is a physician whose specialty is providing comfort to the dying and to their families.
Many of us still think that death is going to be so quick and easy. We hope for that. I mean, I kind of do. We'll just go to sleep and not wake up. Something will happen so fast. But the reality is that's probably not going to happen. We're just going to get frailer and frailer. One thing will get fixed. Your heart will get fixed. Maybe your cancer will get fixed. But then over time, all the little things will add up.
One reason for this increasing sum of maladies is that we are living longer. 100 years ago, the average American life expectancy was just past 50. Now, most make it to nearly 80 years old. That allows people more opportunities to take advantage of the prolific medical advances that have occurred over the last decades. Today, physicians have the ability to keep their patients alive for days and even years longer. But that may not be what the patient wants.
My husband got sick a few years ago, very ill, was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he chose to do the radiation and the chemo, which meant he lost a lot of weight and was not able to do a lot of the things that he had been able to do in the past. So at the end, it wasn't a lot of fun. So watching him suffer. I went to some of the same doctors my husband used. They said, I have lung cancer, stage 4. And unlike my husband, I made the conscious decision I wasn't going to do anything. I didn't like what he went through. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the chemicals and all that. So I made the decision that when it was my turn to die, I would die. My husband and I were alike in a lot of things. Some things we weren't. He was afraid of death. I'm not afraid of death. Never have been. I had a great life, and I don't have anything to feel bad about when I'm gone. And I hope they have a party. Go out and have a margarita or whatever, and have a party and celebrate, because I've had a good life.
Cocktails, golfing, and living the good life can make the end of life seem far away and difficult even to think about, much less to plan for. Oftentimes, a sudden stroke, a fall, or a broken heart will render a parent unable to communicate and yet alive. Then their children have decisions to make.
He's a good father. He's always a good father to me. He's a good grandfather. He was very independent. He was a baker for 30 years. It was the hottest place I've ever been. In a bakery, it's extremely hot. I don't know how my dad did it. He's strong. My dad's a strong man because my dad had a stroke before Christmas. 2 days before he was ready to come home, he had a heart attack, and, wasn't strong for that, but doctors told me that my dad's not going to improve. So my dad had talked to me about if we ever come to this, what his wishes are, and he's going to go on hospice. He told me, just let me go. And I know he talked to me about it because he knows that I'll respect his wishes. He didn't want his family worry because he knows it could be an expense. So he's never afraid to talk about it because it's something that's going to happen eventually to all of us. But sometimes people don't want to talk about things like that. But I'm glad my dad did. If you don't talk about it and try to make decisions before all this happens, then you're kind of lost and everything's just chaos, you know, and I don't want that for my dad. I want it to be peaceful, comfortable. Some people fight, they don't know what to do, what decisions to make. And that's just so important because, you know, like I said, we're all going to go through this, and it's good for your kids to know what your wishes are and what you need to do.
Discussions about end of life can be some of the most difficult conversations that families, friends, and loved ones can have, but also some of the most important. To be effective, those discussions must lead to written documents called end-of-life directives. Each state individually dictates the type of legal paperwork people need to fill out to ensure their dying wishes will be granted. Nationally, less than a third of us have done this. But there is one place, a town along the banks of the Mississippi River, that's different, very different. In La Crosse, Wisconsin, almost everyone, over 95%, have talked about and written down how they want to die.
They're out to the facility with a 92-year-old female. She slipped and fell, didn't hit her head or anything like that, fell to her left-hand side.
No questions at this time. We'll see you in 5 to 8. Gundersen clear.
It honestly is easier to just be full court, be aggressive, do everything, you know, intubate the patient, you know, do the shocks, do the chest compressions, because that's the stuff that we know and do. I mean, we live for that stuff. But that's not always the right thing for the patient, and it's not what they want. And if it's not what they want, then I don't think it's the right thing for the patient. And if we know what the patient wants, everyone's in a much better, happier place, because then we've respected what they wanted to do, and we've done the right thing, and everyone wants to do the right thing.
I would say about 80% of the time we're dealing with people who are seriously ill and are facing life and death decisions, and that care plan helps guide what we're doing.
And those were talking about your preferences for health care.
I've actually been pronounced dead 3 times already. That's when I started thinking about it. What am I doing? And when they brought up the advanced care directives, you know, it was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea.
Good morning. I don't know if it changes how I feel about treating the patient. What it really does is I think it makes me more comfortable to have the conversation with the patient and the family. I mean, we've got kind of a starting point. Maybe I wouldn't have been comfortable bringing that up 30 years ago, but because we have that starting point, I think it makes it much more likely that we'll be able to talk about it and have a very reasonable conversation with the patient and the family.
There are 2 major healthcare centers in La Crosse, a Mayo Clinic affiliate, Franciscan Skemp, and Gundersen Health System. It was here 30 years ago that Bud Hammis pioneered the effort to get people to begin these conversations while he was developing a curriculum for doctors in training.
In that experience in working with these young doctors, I really saw the frequency in which we were facing kind of terrible decisions about someone's life. And they were terrible simply because we didn't know what that person wanted. I was asked to talk with 3 separate families in about a 2-month period. And each of these families was facing a similar decision. What most struck me is the moral distress of these family members, not just in that moment, which was, you know, almost palpable. You could feel the anxiety and distress that they were experiencing. But there was this realization that they would never get over this question. They would never resolve the moral uncertainty for the rest of their lives.
That excruciating experience with the families led to the development of a program called Respecting Choices, which facilitates discussions for end-of-life directives.
We're going to Winona, Minnesota to meet a gentleman and his wife to do a next steps conversation.
In her 3.5 decades as a nurse with Gundersen, Verona Lockman has guided hundreds of patients through these decisions. Today, she is traveling 40 miles north of La Crosse to talk to one patient she has never met.
It's much better if it's at their patient's home. They feel much more comfortable. A lot of times there's lots of tears for family and the facilitator.
The talks can take place anywhere, including at the doctor's office or the kitchen table. Most important thing is just to have the conversation. The ultimate goal is to have in place legal documents that communicate what the patient's wishes are when they are unable to speak for themselves. Those choices can request that the doctor pull out all the stops and do everything and anything possible to prolong your life, or you can choose to have them do very little and anything in between. These discussions also lead to choosing a person to make those decisions for you, if you become unable to decide for yourself.
We have a basic power of attorney for healthcare document that talks about who their agents would be if they weren't able to make their own decisions. And the biggest thing about choosing an agent is you need to have someone who will honor your wishes. So, in your own words, Tom, tell us your understanding of your health condition.
I have advanced prostate cancer. That was what I was diagnosed with in March of 2011. It has since metastasized to my bones.
So what symptoms are you seeing that he's having too?
I think this disease and some of the treatments and medications have caused some change in our relationship, and certainly our kids notice. You know, Dad doesn't have the energy or the stamina that he used to have.
Our grandson wants to play kickball all the time. I'm going, I would love to.
So kind of based on your conversations, you know, would you want her to strictly follow what you've written down, or based on what's going on, you know, kind of make the best decision for you?
Well, I'd like him to follow as close as possible, but again, this is one of those things that you fill out when you're feeling really good, you know, and you think, well, I should probably have this in place. And so the circumstances around a person failing, their body failing, they're always a little bit different. And so, and they're there on the scene, and I might be sleeping or out of it. And so I would want them to think of all those possibilities and make a decision that is sort of in line with what they see from the advance directive. Yeah.
Medical personnel aren't the only ones facilitating these discussions at Gundersen Health System. Members of the clergy also help out.
I'm Tori. I'm an advanced care planning facilitator here. So I work with other health professionals. Would you prefer to have your care focused on keeping you comfortable without using medical interventions to keep you alive?
The problem is I know my body is weak and everything. Ain't nothing I can do about it. Because, you know, if they put me on, like, on life machine, I don't want to do that. My mother, she was on it.
Okay.
And she suffered. Plus my first wife, she was on it. And she suffered. And see, now I don't want to suffer like that.
Yeah.
See, if, you know, I was on life machine, just let me go and get it over with. That's the only way I can put it.
When people do choose to forego some types of treatment, there is a direct effect on the financial bottom line of the hospitals. Added to that lost revenue is the cost of providing this service.
Undoubtedly, every year, compared to the national average, there's tens of millions of dollars of revenue that we don't get, that others may. And when CFOs challenge me about that, saying, boy, but that's hard, why would you do that? I tell them that it's our responsibility to deliver what matters to the patient, and that we have no intention of balancing our financial books on the backs of seniors by overtreating them or giving them care that they would not want.
It's not clear that there's anything about the demographics in our community that makes this successful. We think what's made this successful is our ability to engage our community and help them understand that this is of great value to them and to their families. When we understand the patient's choice, and when I say we, I mean not only the health professionals but also the family. Families have less guilt and less uncertainty and less distress, less depression, less anxiety. So the emotional impact to them, on them when they know the choice of their parent is far less. And while they're going to be sad about the loss of their parent, they're going to move forward knowing that the care that was provided and they agreed to and supported was completely in accord with what their mother or father wanted. Most families see that as just a tremendous gift and as a great blessing that they know they did the right thing at the right time.
And timing is often crucial. It is never too early to pass on to your family what your end-of-life wishes are. Sometimes the prognosis for a person arrives before they've given it much thought. Suddenly, they find themselves considering the previously unthinkable.
Estoy aquí porque me han descubierto un cáncer. Un cáncer que es la etapa final.
Hi, Dolores. Hi. Okay.
Dolores Duarte has fought and won cancer battles before, but she won't win this time. Dolores, one of 8 brothers and sisters, is learning about hospice care for the first time, along with her sister Carmen.
Fue cuando me diagnosticaron que ya no tenía remedio, que ya todo esto era terminal y que ya no podían hacer nada por mí. Me tenía que ir a hospice. Va a ser nomás para, según ellos, para los últimos días míos, que no viva en dolor, que no esté sufriendo tanto. Eso es lo que nomás ellos van a estar. Me van a tener lo que yo ocupe a mi alrededor, pero según ellos va a ser el final. Pero yo está bien, recibo esa ayuda, pero mi mente todavía no dice que me voy a morir. Yo lo único que quiero decir de mi salud, que mi fe es fuerte y que no creo, como yo voy a seguir adelante luchando. Pero que si llega el final, pues si Dios me lo decide, yo estoy contenta. Sé que voy a dejar a mi esposo, a mis hijos, a mis hermanos dolida. Van a sufrir porque ellos lloran, ellos se van a quedar llorando. Pero yo tengo una paz en mi corazón que si también tengo que partir, ni modo, yo me pongo en las manos de Dios.
Modern hospice treatment first started soon after World War II in England and began in the United States in the 1960s. But to many patients, hospice remains a confusing concept, if they've heard of it at all.
Hospice is a process to assist persons in their dying. Oftentimes hospice is thought of as a place. It's not a place. It is a way by which a team of people assist a family and the patient to die as well as they can die, and to assist them in that process, both emotionally, physically, spiritually, so they can die well.
For Medicare and many insurance plans to pay for hospice, 2 physicians must certify that the patient has less than 6 months to live.
The national discharge rate from hospice, for example, is 19%. That many people get so well that they discharge from hospice. When people stop medications that, who knew they were having side effects too? When you allow the body to heal naturally, when spiritual needs are met, when reconciliation happens, people get better. Sometimes they get better spiritually and they do die, but an amazing number of them simply get better physically as well.
I was put in hospice, and then it was decided that I was not dying fast enough, and so to put it most succinctly, I flunked the hospice program. My wife was in hospice also. She did not flunk. I have done I've done quite a bit of reflecting, meditating, praying. I dare say that my spiritual life has been enriched. That may be a big price to pay for spiritual enrichment. You gotta die. But maybe that's part of the design of the universe. I don't know. I don't pretend in any way or form to know what the furniture of heaven looks like, or what the final future is all about. That's far beyond me. But I live in faith that that it will all come together. That there is meaning rather than meaninglessness. That love rather than hate will be the final word. And the joy rather than despair will be the meaning of it all.
Given that death is as old as life itself, you'd think there wasn't much left to learn about it. But there is. Many institutions are doing research on different aspects of passing on, including at Stanford University School of Medicine in Palo Alto, California.
But when you're imagining someone who has limited health literacy, limited English proficiency, limited numeracy, which is what I'm going to talk about today.
Vijay Periyakoil, a doctor and professor, is a central figure in several of these studies. In her research on cultural and ethnic differences in dying, she has spent countless hours listening to stories like these told at a church not far from the university.
Five years ago, my husband passed away at the age of 94. The family was never properly informed, probably due to language barrier. And so the doctor recommended chemotherapy. She saw the suffering and all the bad complications as a result from the chemotherapy. And I feel that if we know what is to come, we may have chosen something differently. And this has been my greatest regret since I came to the States.
The biggest barrier, the number one barrier that doctors report is the language barrier, because they have so much to say and they don't know how to say it across the language barrier. Sharing a common vocabulary is really important because if you don't do that, you may not be talking about the same thing. Medical interpreters are an amazing resource. Sometimes patients and families feel that even having that extra one person when they have sort of a private, confidential conversation with the doctor can somehow be distracting. In certain cultures, definitely there is a taboo in terms of speaking of death, and planning for death might actually make it a self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning you might be invoking death or making or hastening death by planning for it.
We need to decide for ourselves how we want to live and how we want to be treated. We don't know what the stages we need to go through, or the terminologies involved, or the processes, the options that we have. And finally, in view of these, we need to decide for ourselves what we wish to do with our end the life.
We've worked with Chinese Americans, we've worked with Filipino Americans, South Asians, and Vietnamese. And we found that in Chinese American, Vietnamese American especially, and also in some South Asian families, people are very reluctant to even think about planning for end of life, let alone have end of life conversations. Having said that, when I've spoken directly with the patients, especially when they're older adults or when the patient knows that they have limited time, they are actually eager to talk about it. And I use the word eager in a very sort of deliberate fashion. They are actually very eager to talk about it because they are worried about not knowing what is to come. They really want to better understand how to prepare. They're worried about being a burden on their family, and all of that creates sort of a sense of urgency in them to talk about this. In situations like that, it will often be the family, typically, it will often be an adult son or daughter who cannot think about living in a world without their parents or don't want to talk about their parents, end of life. And so they are the ones who may not want to talk about it.
Liu's husband had suffered 20 years as a result of a number of strokes before he went to his rest. And on second thought, if looking back, if they have known what was to come, they would have decided differently. But they came with 10 years of suffering on the part of her husband and also on her part. And if they can decide again, she will let her husband go peacefully.
What I found is when you're trying to push patients to quickly make decisions when they don't feel that they have engaged all the stakeholders in their circle, things don't go very well after that. The physician tells the information to the patient, it's full disclosure, and the patient tells you what they want, you work together to implement it. So that's sort of the traditional mainstream model, but that may not work very well in certain ethnic cultures. For example, in cultures where they make decisions together as a family. That's one model where the entire family needs to be involved and they all talk about it and make decisions by consensus. Another a common thing that I have seen is where the patient might actually defer to someone in the family, and that person might be an oldest son, it could be the spouse. For example, in certain Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, if the patient is a woman, she might defer to her husband in terms of the decision making, and that's just their style. When we see them in clinic, it's our turf, so it feels very alien to patients, and so that is very repressive in terms of them being able to talk very easily. And so I think that what we see with them is people being very quiet, being more in a listening mode. Then the doctors immediately take on the role of instruction without quite figuring out whether the patient, how much the patient knows or what they understand. The key thing to do is find that trigger to get them to talk.
I lost my mom. I am daughter.
What can we do to make your day a little happier?
Often the most important element of patients' stories is their understanding of their condition and their prognosis. And there is only one way to find out.
You ask, you listen. What do people think they want? What's their understanding of the big picture? And when I was a young doctor, I thought I had a lot of answers. And I was trained that way. I look back with a little more compassion. I was trained that I was so smart and had all the answers. And I had this vision that if I used big words and opined, that people needed that. And now I realize, maybe with my own wisdom, that people have a lot of answers. They've had a lot of experiences, especially at this point, and they already know a lot. We start with understanding that this body is failing. They may not know all the details. They don't know, their sodium level or their creatinine or the exact valve diameter. That's not important. It's the big picture. What is your perspective of the big picture in sum of you or your loved one's health? The second, what are you hoping for? What do you want to have happen? What are your wishes? What are your values? And finally, what are you most worried about? What are the things that you want to have done, the things that you are going to regret? What is weighing on your mind the most? And then from that comes a treatment plan that's based in what this person, this family, values the most. Every family is their own culture. Every person is a mystery and a gift. And when you match a treatment plan to that, it works.
Another technique that can work is reverting back to a way that medical care was historically delivered, at home.
Hello! I have been impressed by how much you learn about someone by going to their home. They want to be able to take care of themselves and their own homes. When they say, what's quality of life when you're getting older, that's what they want. How have you been feeling?
It was feeling okay.
Feeling okay? I've been taking care of Jane for 3 years, and her husband, Colonel Frank Klein, called to ask if someone could come to the home to help him take care of his wife, for her memory loss was getting worse. And his prayer is that he stays well enough to take care of her.
You gonna walk? Okay.
He's in his 90s, she's in her 80s, and they've been married over 60 years.
So careful to walk.
I very much appreciate her coming here. I've got to be with her as much as I can because if she's prone to fall when she walks too long. So I try to watch her pace, and if she looks like she's getting tired, I got to find a way to get her to sit down. So that's a challenge. My goal is simply to be here for her. And I know that my children would like for me to have it easier, but with me, it's a one-on-one situation. If she were in a care home, it wouldn't be a one-on-one situation anymore. And of course, there's familiarity with the house here. So there's all kinds of advantages to having her here with me rather than in a care home, for example. I suspect my children will put in a care home if I'm gone. You've got to have patience. And you've got to try to figure things out. That takes time because I've learned a lot by just listening and recognizing her attitudes, and I've got to fit in solutions to things that are problematic. That's all. But that takes a little patience, so that's a challenge. So I'll do it to the end. But, you know, that's the way it goes. And that's the way evolution treats us, you know. We just live so long, and I try to live as long as I can for her. That's it. You want to sit down a little bit? Want to sit down a little bit?
Okay. Okay.
Listening is essential. The firmly held beliefs of both the patients and their caregivers will dictate the type of care delivered by the visiting physicians.
I've been taking care of Ruby for over 10 years, and she's a fighter, and she has a will to live. Her goals of care are to mostly be comfortable, but she wants to be treated when she can recover. Her son's dedicated to her, and he is not a medical person, but he is a dedicated son, and he's learned to do a lot of things nurses do.
She wouldn't be alive today if she had to sit in a doctor's office with all the flus and bronchitis and all the coughing going on. Too susceptible, you know, too weak, lungs are weak, you're gonna catch anything. And she'd be fighting it all the time.
Because of the bleeding.
There's been numerous things that's come up since I met you in 2004 that I beat the odds. And I think it's my home health care that I've got from you. I mean, everything. If I hadn't had you as a doctor, I would probably have died a long time ago.
Who's your power of attorney? It's John.
John.
And he pretty much knows your thoughts on those things.
Yes, he does.
You're fighting and you're fighting, right?
I'm a fighter and he knows that.
Yeah.
You're young and you're healthy, you know, it's easy to say, oh yeah, if I'm incapacitated and all that, you know, pull the plug. But when you're on your deathbed dying, that's certainly not what you want. You know, you want to keep on living, everybody does. That's kind of the understanding that we have, you know, like, I'll keep her alive as long as she has some sort of quality of life.
I've been a fighter all my life, and I've been through some pretty close scrapes throughout my life. And I've just always said, you know, it's just that, like that train, that little engine that could, and that's me. And I never give up. But I still want to live. I mean, why go when you're still healthy? Not really healthy, but
But you can't kill her trying to save her, you know, and that's something, you know, that everybody, you know, on this team's got to understand, you know, because she's frail, she's got bad COPD, and you know, you just got to be careful.
Thank you for letting us
The declining practice of delivering medical care at home, house calls, also changed where people died.
100 years ago, even more recently than that, death was something that happened all around us all the time. And all ages, you know, people were dying, and so it really was part of the fabric of our life. With the medicalization of life in general, most people died in the hospital, isolated from their families, even mortuaries, which were originally, you know, people had wakes and stuff at home, that became much more isolated. And so I think our culture just progressively marginalized death, put it behind doors and said that's not something we're going to be involved with. But the hospice movement really brought it to us and said, you know, people are dying, people need help and support and comfort as they die, and we're here to deliver that because the medical profession was not. Now we'd like to think that those worlds are coming together, and palliative care as a new specialty, I think, is evidence of the importance that physicians recognize in terms of providing palliative care to patients. Traditionally, palliative care starts usually when somebody has an advancing condition. And it means to focus on the things that can impact on their quality of life: pain and other symptom management, spiritual issues, family issues. That whole spectrum that is so important to people, but that for many years physicians and other providers ignored. And so this palliative care brings, again, to the front the idea that this is something that we should always be on our mind, that our role is to comfort and support people. Compassionate care always has a place in medicine. When you ask young physicians why they went into medicine, a lot of them say, I want to cure cancer, I want to cure heart disease, I want to do all this stuff. And the reality is that the role of a physician or a healer, is in many ways to cure rarely, treat often, comfort always. And not all young physicians understand that. Students, not all elder physicians really understand that either.
Some medical schools are trying to emphasize the importance of compassionate end-of-life care, beginning with new students. One way is to have the future doctors consider their own mortality by filling out their personal end-of-life directives.
And did you all get a chance to fill out the living will? We're not going to collect it, but you went through the process. That's all I mean, you went through the process.
Doing this exercise for myself, which I hadn't done before, was really eye-opening for me, and honestly, it's uncomfortable to talk about death.
The mother was panicking, why aren't you doing anything?
You know, I thought it would be easier. A lot of times we think, why doesn't everybody have a living will? You know, we give it to our patients, why haven't they filled it out? And it made sense to me doing it, why it's not done more, just because it's hard to think about, hard to put yourself in that position.
We recognize that we need to start early with students and introduce them to this concept, so they don't see death as a failure and they don't disappear when their patients are dying because they feel somehow they've let them down. Once somebody becomes ill, the options, the ability to really comprehend, gets compromised. And so that's why we like to start the conversation when it's not an urgent or emergent situation.
Urgent medical situations often mean more surgery, more medicines, and more interventions. Each of those pills and costly procedures must be paid for.
Great lady. Born in 1925, she's 89 years old. She met and married my dad when she was in her early 20s, and they had 56 great years together.
A few days before, on Mother's Day, Barbara Horvath was unable to recognize a picture of herself in her wedding dress. For the last 8 years since her husband passed, she's been on a slow, steady mental decline, and now she is declining physically as well. Barbara has just been brought to the hospital from her assisted living care facility due to a series of mini-strokes.
Hanging on. We had talked to the family, my brother and sister, and that we all agreed on this comfort care approach when the time came to come back into the room, and she was hooked up to all the monitors, and they took the monitors off. And then it was like, oh crap, this is real. This is really happening, so. You think you're prepared for it. And everybody says, how are you doing? How are you doing? And you say, you're doing okay, but when it's different when it starts happening. I'd like to think that she could hear me and knows that I'm here. She doesn't really know where she is, or she's not very with it right now. Our biggest concerns are that she is safe and she is comfortable and that she's not afraid. But we have family concerns too about the financial aspects of her situation and just everything being so sudden.
I don't know if most people realize that if you have a child with cancer, 50% of those families go into bankruptcy. That's a child with cancer. For seniors, 25% go into bankruptcy, 43% lose their primary residence. I know as a young physician, I was never taught the cost of things and the burdens that that places on families. But when you ask an open-ended question,
what else have you been worried about? Money.
Tell me about that.
Well,
I mean, I hear it from a lot of families, but what's...
Money has been a source of stress for the last year because what she had was dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And we knew that we would reach a point that we would bottom out.
Doctors may not learn about the cost of the care they prescribe, but they know very well how to deliver care that will prolong lives that may be nearing their end. While the quantity of days the patients survive may be extended, the quality of those days often is not. This is a lesson nearly all doctors take to heart personally.
Doctors die differently than patients. We actually don't participate in medical care very much at the end of our lives. We die as well. And we don't go to the ICU. We don't, in general, get dialysis. We've been surveyed. We don't get CPR. We don't get intubated. When it's our turn to die, we are one of the highest users of hospice care. We want morphine, we want comfort, we want to be at home. We do not participate in medical care. No one knows more about medical care at the end of life than doctors, right? No one knows more than surgeons what the outcome is likely to be. And yet we get the least amount of medical care.
Nobody is nearer to or has had more conversations with dying people than hospice workers and doctors. Betsy McGregor, a retired physician, has been involved in hundreds of such conversations and practiced in New York City during the height of the AIDS epidemic. She has learned from them all.
Every dying is different because every person is different. Every life is different. The generation that's aging now has much more curiosity about the end of life and wanting to go into that experience consciously and with preparation. And it's interesting that I saw in my career a time when giving birth was very medicalized and kept behind closed doors. There came a time when women said, no, we want to participate in this experience. It's a transformational human experience, and we want to be conscious for it. And so gradually, giving birth changed hugely from this very controlled experience to one where it was completely natural and women and families were present. And so our generation now has aged to the point where the next major experience in life is dying. And we're bringing the same kind of curiosity to it and the same interest in wanting to participate and learn from it. I find that very exciting.
I've heard people say to me that they're more afraid of dying than they are of death. I think people are really afraid of dying and the pain of dying and the suffering of dying and what might happen to the families around them more than anything else.
All the preparation for passing on may not lessen the sorrow of death, but it can help prevent regret your surviving loved ones may feel. While death is the reality we all face, the more we pass on our preferences for the way we want to die, the less anguish our survivors will feel.
Someone said that one time when we come to that point of knowing that we're going to die, that there is a sense of blessed recognition, that we do recognize that we are going to die, and to come to that place of acceptance and to be able to look at it fully and wholly, then we can move ahead. It's when we deny and we shut off and we don't talk about it that it becomes more difficult for us. I think that presently we're still a death-denying society. Very few people really are involved in talking about death and dying. And the more we can get people to talk about death and dying and about end of life and about advanced directives and about those things that would assist them in their dying process, the better it will be.
There's something else that goes on when humans can recognize the end is close. That life force is shutting down. And what we need then, fixing the little things no longer works. We need to come together
ask each other, especially family, what do you observe? What is your understanding? And that's where the truth is, and the miracle of love and compassion, the miracle of opening ourselves to other possibilities when cure isn't possible, but comfort and beauty and reconciliation and love. That's those other miracles.
This program was made possible by the David and Laura Lovell Foundation in support of Arizona Public Media's efforts to educate people on the spectrum of life options, and by the Marshall Foundation, supporting charitable organizations in Tucson and Pima County, Arizona, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. To order DVD copies of this and other productions from Arizona Public Media, please visit us online at azpm.org/DVD. You can also find out more information about this program at passing-on.org.